Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Radio Ramadan 87.7 FM Reflections program, and I'm your host Zubair Akram with my guest Sheikh Rizwan Muhammad. Today is another session on Surah Quraysh, um, and I must say that quite a fascinating journey we've had so far. Uh, Around 16 sessions on Surah Fil, and we've just started Surah Quraysh and the connection between Surah Fil and Quraysh, and the definition and understanding or the reflection on just the word ilaf, talif, ulfat, social contract, connections, security, serenity. And I learned, along with all the listeners yesterday, that there is a term called cloud of meaning, as like a Wi-Fi cloud. So it's not unidirectional. It's like a dome of meaning, which we extract the meanings from, and it is not one thing; it's many that conveys the meaning. Assalamu alaikum, Sheikh.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Ilaf, Sheikh.
Mhm.
Ilaf. Uh, यानी मैं सोचता रहा हूँ इलाफ के बारे में. And today, in Fajr and then in Zuhr here in Istanbul, they did Surah Mu'minun as a
Mhm.
as a as a collective recitation. قد أفلح المؤمنون.
Mm.
Um, and Imam just now after Asr, he started the characteristics of Mu'minin, and in which he also touched upon ilaf, talif, ulfat,
Mm.
connection, brotherhood as well. Anil Moridun, Khashi'un. And
Mhm.
then he started talking about ilaf as well, talif, ulfat, sorry, not
Mm.
talif, ulfat. Uh, I just want to spend, say, next 5 to 10 minutes on the concept of ilaf, ulfat,
Mhm.
what it means, and especially what it means for us.
Mhm.
Uh, you know,
Okay.
the meaning of ulfat, the layers of the meaning of ulfat and ilaf.
Okay. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So yesterday we did start off the chapter, and we obviously have to start off with the first grammatically the first thing, which is li ilaf. So it's the lam is a preposition,
Mm.
and we said it's kind of it's dangling without any connection unless you connect it to something else, which is assumed. And we talked about the fact that that is in the minds of the prominent companions, this was considered to be a continuation of the chapter, which was the chapter of the elephant, and all the discussion we took there, we brought into this, which is all that happened in the instance of the war elephant and the army of Abraha was so that this thing would happen. And the thing that essentially we were talking about is elaf. Elaf is an interesting word. We kind of touched upon it yesterday. And yes, as you said, there's a meaning cloud, meaning cloud. Yeah, meaning cloud, which
Mm.
is basically the word itself and its root then gives rise to lots of derivations in terms of Arabic, just the words themselves. But those words have meanings which have connotations and interconnect, which makes a very rich canvas, a very rich image in the mind of the reader about what this chapter is about, what it's intending to convey. And as you said, ulfa, um, ta'lif, ma'luf, mu'allafa, um, um, allafa. These are all words that come up in the Quranic text. And they all indicate this idea of cohesion, in some way a sense of safety, in some ways a sense of sociability, in some sense a sense of safety, in some
Mm.
ways a sense of affection and love and proximity. They indicate even, I would say, an associated thing which actually relates to this chapter, which is safe passage. Safe passage meaning being able to travel freely between one place and another. But in a wider sense, mu'allafa and ta'lif and ma'luf are all words that are essentially part and parcel of what is required for a very healthy, successful, vibrant society. So this chapter actually ties in something I said, I think, when I was doing Surah Al-Fil, which is the fact that the communication style of the Quran is always to do with fear and hope. So there's always this idea of a targhib with tarhib. So tarhib is this kind of warning, fear, this trepidation, and this awe that comes, which then pushes you to do something because of the fear factor. And on the other hand, you have targhib, which is to do with exhorting somebody or in encouraging somebody to do something through a reward. So in the kind of common example of that would be carrot and stick approach.
Mm-hmm.
Was it carrot and what was this? I forgot what I said. Stick.
Carrot and stick.
Stick. Carrot is something to entice, and the stick is to hit. This fasting is destroying my brain activity. So the CPU in my brain is just going way down. Yeah, carrot and stick. Is that carrot and stick? Yeah, carrot and stick. The carrot and stick approach is very powerful in terms of communication. So the chapter on the elephant is about fear. It's God can decimate you, فَجَعَلَهُمْ كَأَصْفٍ مَأْكُولٍ, can chew you up, can make you chewed up like, scrawled, decimated wheat fields. Okay, and that is the length of destruction. So if you think of it, actually, we didn't talk about the image too much. A wheat field, from a distance, you just see yellow. But if you go up to the wheat, it stands up proud. The wheat stalk stands up direct, very tall and very, very proud. But the strength of it is very little. An animal can come through and just trample on the bottom and it all falls down directly. It falls down. And so this, the image is of a wheat field, which is just totally trampled and eaten up and chewed up. And it has no use at all. The wheat is going to be, if it remains on the ground, it'll be useless. It'll rot. So that's the fear. But then the fear then is now going to be followed up for the Quraysh with this hope and this positive image of the fact that they are in a state of ulfa amongst themselves, amongst the Qurayshi tribe itself. And also its social setting as well. We'll see in terms of how the societies are around them, the nations, the major empires around them are, and how they relate to the Quraysh. But then, for a wider thing, it's about ulfa, it's about cohesion, it's about tranquility. So the purpose of a healthy society, you would imagine, is not a large GDP, economic prosperity, which may just congregate in the hands of a few. It's about the fact that everyone in society feels welcome, feels part of the whole, feels valued, and feels important. And so a successful society would be one where the society itself feels content with its members.
And any familiarity is there, friendliness is there, connections are there, network is there.
Yeah, if you think of happiness and where you would imagine the perfect balance to be in terms of work, life, family, hobbies, interests, intellectual pursuits, physical health. Where's that perfect mean? Where's the perfect sweet spot for a society to have? That is essentially where this ulfa comes from. Ulfa is this common concern, you could imagine, amongst people in a community, looking out for each other. And so that is the image that's coming up when you talk about li'ilafi, li'ilaf. The instance of the elephant and the destruction of that army was so that this society within which the Prophet ﷺ was born. And remember, we talked about the fact that this was the Surah Al-Fil was essentially to prepare the Prophet ﷺ's coming in Mecca al-Mukarramah to be a place of safety and security. And so li'ilafi is essentially saying that all of that was a preparation and a preamble to the coming of the Messenger ﷺ to Mecca al-Mukarramah. And of course, it came within the context of a tribe, the Quraysh, a social context, a political context, an economic context. All of that was conducive to his coming. All that was conducive to him coming safely and securely, and so that you could also then hone in on the real problems of a society. If you take away the safety and security aspects, the problem that they had wasn't the issue of safety, security, and economic poverty or external pressures. There was an internal, deep spiritual problem at the heart of that society, which is why I remember Sayyid Ramadan al-Bouti, rahimahullah, passed away, in the Syrian conflict, during the Syrian conflict. So there's something very interesting in his fiqh sirah, in which he basically asks the question and answers it, is why was the Prophet ﷺ sent to that part of the world? Essentially, why wasn't he sent in Palestine? Why was he not sent in the Levant, Asham? Why was he not sent in the Euphrates basin or Egypt, where all these possible places you could send a prophet? Why was he sent in the midst of that? And essentially his answer is that it was outside the sphere of influence of the major cultural, economic, military powers of the time, so that he was protected in one way. He was protected, his message was protected, but also there wasn't a complication in what the problem in society was. So the problem is not like the secondary issues are economic, the secondary issues are military, the secondary issues are political, but the primary issues are belief. The primary issues are about conceptualizing truth and how the world should work and how the world should be ordered.
Social fabric?
No, not even that. No, the core is tawheed. The core is your relationship to how events unfold and where they come from and what your responsibility is to them. The extraneous secondary ones are, economic, parity and equality, political degree of freedom in terms of individuals and their agency and volition, basic safety and security. These are things that come out of how you relate with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, how you relate with God. In other words, what does it mean, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Inna akramakum indallahi atqakum? You have to understand that your relationship with God is important so that you can say that the best of us in the eyes of God is the one that has the most fear of Allah, not the most wealthy, not the most powerful, not the most industrious, the one that has the most taqwa. Everything's built around this idea, and this is why the verse before that talks about God has created you in tribes and nations. Later arafu, your differences in your languages and your colors. All of these are extraneous, secondary issues. The core, in terms of your privilege, is going to be related to your connection to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So once you sort that out, then you can start to look at what does that then mean in terms of how people treat each other. What does it mean in terms of how the politics works? How does it mean in terms of war and peace? What does it mean in terms of sociability and creating strong family units? What does it mean for that secondarily? And so this is why Surah Quraysh is such an interesting one, because it says
But
that
is it not the case that you need to know Allah so that you can have all these orders in place? Social order, family unit, ulfa, a communal feeling, community, cohesion, if you like. So the objectives are these things, and the means is connection with God.
yes, so, the objective is these things, and the means is you could why not flip it? Why not say the objective
Yeah,
is
so because we are living in this world, this
yeah,
earth, and in order to live successfully in harmony, in peace, in serenity of the heart,
Mm-hmm.
these things are necessary. So these are objectives. Uh, Connection with God is abstract. This
Mm-hmm.
is real.
Okay. But the thing is, how do you tune in and how do you sync all those aspects when you don't have a core, a core objective reality that everything turns towards to order everything else, like a gravitational force. It's
Mhm.
like essentially belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is like a spiritual gravitational force which centers all the discussions about economy, about politics, about war and peace, about interpersonal relations, about what happiness actually is. Otherwise, your idea about economic prosperity and economic access is could be Marxist, it could be free market, it could be Keynesian, it could be numerous, liberal free market economy, whatever it is, as valid as anybody else's. Like every one idea about economic, what needs to be done in the economic sphere is as valid as anybody else's. Your idea about war and peace and what is valid can be as valid as anybody else's. And you can see in the world now, there's numerous voices considering themselves to be valid,
Mhm.
either whether it's to do with might is right or whether it's to do with the just economic or political international order or whatever. They're all got their reasons for doing it. Until you center it in the core force of that, which gives gravity to it, you won't be able to your objectives are different from other people's. Essentially, everybody will have a different objective that they want to adhere to and different ways of getting to those. So prosperity and economic stability and happiness for everybody is not the purpose of everybody. Not everybody agrees on that objective. Most people in human history have come to the conclusion that what is right is that we provide for our own people. Throughout human history, why do wars take place? Is because we have more of a right and privilege over land and resources than other people. And therefore, if it requires us to take that land and those resources by force and killing and maiming and slaughtering, we will do it. And we are naive if we think otherwise, because even today, what is it? It's a war over access to resources. Essentially, it's the raw, energy that's required to move the world economy is being fought over. And this idea about freedom, women's rights, freedom, abstract ideas such as those are complete rubbish. This is complete farce. And so, if you don't have the center, which is that there's no privilege for, like the Prophet in the farewell pilgrimage said, there's no privilege for an Arab over a non-Arab and a white over the black, except in 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 piety. In akramakum indallahi atqakum, that the most elevated of you in the eyes of God is the one that has the most awareness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is a complete game changer
Mhm.
because it takes away the whole idea of privilege, it takes the whole idea of gender privilege, it takes away the idea of national privilege, ethnic privilege, if there was such a thing as ethnic, and that's essentially, you need it to create this sense of what we talked about today, which is ta'lif,
Mhm.
ulfa, the sense of cohesion. In this sense, cohesion. But in the sense of this chapter, it'll actually be something else, which will be what I talked about when the Prophet came to that place because it was safe.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
because one of
So
the
Ilaf is security and trade.
in this situation actually is related to something that happened. It's a historical thing because then it goes back to, again, the first chapter we looked at is a very
Mm.
historical thing. It's an event in history. We know the
Yeah.
people, we know the protagonists, we know the events, we know when it happened. And Quraysh is also a historical tribe. It's not an abstract thing, it's a real thing, it's
Mhm.
people. And again, this security and safety is very interesting because Elaf is actually it's actually in the name of a contract as well. So the reason I didn't mention it, yesterday and up until to now, is because you have to understand the word cloud, the meaning cloud of Elaf, and then realize Elaf here actually means safe passage. It's a contract of safe passage, which was specifically facilitated for the Quraysh that allowed them to essentially have the best of all worlds. Relative protection outside the sphere of influence of the Roman and Persian empires, able to do trade in Yemen and in the Levant.
Mm-hmm.
Basically when it was conducive for them to make the most money, they went south. When it was
Mm-hmm.
conducive for them to make money in the north, they went north. In other words, that wasn't something, and you couldn't just go between. If you're in the Sassanid Empire, Persian Empire, and you wanted to trade with the Romans, you couldn't just go across.
Mm-hmm.
But the Quraysh were given this opportunity that they could have the best of all worlds, and that was based upon the fact that, again, why was the Prophet sent in that specific geographical location, which is outside the sphere of these two major powers? And also, it comes to a deeper thing, which is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent the Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam and ordered him to create the Kaaba there specifically. Bibakka. Bakka, it means Mecca. And that was then facilitated through Qusay ibn Kilab, one of the great grandparents of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, who then had in his lineage there was four brothers who then essentially, again, it's quite a fascinating thing, they were able to strike up. They have trade agreements now. So you have, UK exited the economic European Union, didn't they? And you had Brexit. So now they have to negotiate trade agreements with all the different countries individually, like India and China and America and so on and so forth. Not going well. But essentially what happened is these four brothers, which was Hashim, Abdul Shams, Muttalib, and Nawfal, they ended up going to different locations and striking up trade agreements, essentially. So Hashim went to the rulers of Ghatafan and Syria, and he struck up the ability for them to trade freely. Abdul Shams went to Abyssinia, and he was able to allow them to go and come for economic movement. Muttalib was able to go to the Yemen and strike up the ability for them to travel down and come back, buy and sell. And Nawfal went to Persia and the Sassanid. So essentially you've got the Abyssinians, you've got the Persians, you've got the Romans, and you've got all of these within the sphere of influence of essentially free trade agreements, but also safety. With the free trade doesn't make any sense until you're given unless you're given protection as well. So Allah says, look, Quraysh, look what we just did to Ashab al-Fil, and now look at yourself. That's the fear factor, the companions of the war elephant. Now let's look at yourself. Let's look at how sweet we've made everything for you. You can go up and down, north, south, east, west, trade as you want. You have relative safety. We protected you from, marauding armies and even attacks directly focused to you. And those agreements were called the Ilaf, the safe passage agreements that the Quraysh were given. And so that's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is pointing them towards. Look at your situation. Look at the very simple, sweet set of cards that you have for yourself. So you need to think, why is that happening? Why are you given so much safety and relative security and cohesion within yourselves as well as a tribe? You have to start to give thanks. Otherwise, the indication is towards Ashab al-Fil.
Okay, let's take a short break here, and inshallah we'll cover ayah 2 and 3. And I've got quite specific questions in my head, where this is all going, inshallah. So a short ad break, and we will be right back.
कहाँ ऐसी खुशबू चमन के गुलों में कहाँ जो नबी के पसीने में मौजूद है हमने आँखों से देखा नहीं है मगर हमने आँखों से देखा नहीं है मगर उनकी तस्वीर सीने में मौजूद है जिसने लाकर कलामे इलाही दिया जिसने लाकर में मौजूद
Reflections of Sheikh Ridwan Muhammad, Surah Quraysh. This is the second session of Surah Quraysh. First ayah, the concept of ilaf, a trade pact, a trade route, and a trade agreement, a free zone agreement with protection, is what was divinely promised by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala after the events of Surah Fil, after the events described in Surah Fil, of Abraha, the warring elephants, and how they were decimated, and how Quraysh were protected, and not just protected from this calamity that would have struck them, but with a gift, a divine gift. And we are trying to explore why were they given this divine gift? Why them? Why did they give this gift?
Mm.
What make them deserving of this divine gift?
So that comes back to the whole thing about the story of the elephant is essentially preparation for the Prophet ﷺ. The safety and security and divine ordering of them at that specific geographical place with the safety, security, and free trade and all these things, essentially is also for that very purpose, which is to bring them into the sphere of influence of nobody, essentially, apart from themselves. So it creates, it's like a controlled experiment where, that's essentially what I was saying before the break, but I didn't say it in this way. It's like a controlled experiment where you're testing out what is it that society is missing that would make it whole. And so the only thing that is there that is dysfunctional within that society is their belief system, that leads to internal, they have security, safety in terms of passage, but internally, in terms of belief systems, in terms of how they view the world, how they view themselves, how they view creation, how they view their relationship with a deity, with God, that's dysfunctional. It's the only thing that's dysfunctional. And if it was to be fixed, you would have a perfectly unified, perfectly healthy example of how a society should be ordered. And so that's exactly why it is. That safety security is for the preparation of the Prophet ﷺ to come, and not so it can't be claimed that the Prophet ﷺ is working on the back of the influence of the Persians or the Romans, that he's within the sphere of influence of those people. What he's allowed to do, ﷺ, then is just to present the message, and it comes out very clear because there's very little in terms of friction apart from the belief system itself and the call to Tawheed. The call to the unity of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the main thing that he focuses on for the majority of his time in Makkah al-Mukarramah. He talks about, shortchanging and, oppression of the orphan and the female infanticide that took place. He talked about those, but they were manifestations of their disconnect with God. And so this comes back to the fact that the Prophet ﷺ was sent within a protected sphere, within a specific protected and incubated environment where the message would be able to resonate and then be spread, not on the back of military power of Persia or the Romans, or within the complexity of that type of society where you have different tribes, nations, you have different languages, you'd have different cultural inputs. Everything's the same. Everything is just like a pind, as we say, like a backwater. Because essentially Arabia in Mecca was a backwater. It wasn't anything else. And that it required, and Sayyid Ramadan Bhuti, rahimahullah, what he essentially was saying is the final message required to be sent to a backwater, out of civilization's gaze, almost out of sight, out of mind. But that out of sight, out of mind was what we have now, which is, this flourishing of Islam culturally, religiously, as probably the only challenger to, now, if you look at now, without any doubt, only challenger to a world hegemony, which is seeking to enslave people at the hands of a very small, oligarchy, economic oligarchy. And that's not coincidence, because at the core of what makes us insist that we will not give up is La ilaha illallah. Like we're not going to negotiate something that's so essential to our existence.
Sheikh, I have a little trouble digesting this. Sorry. So the abstract idea of believing in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala,
Uh-huh.
okay, belief, subhanallah, okay, love of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The holders of this love and holders of this connection haven't been able to organize even the smallest of things in this world at the moment,
Mm-hmm.
where we live. You know, in medicine, in communication, in transport, air travel, sea navigation, trade routes. None of it is controlled by the holders of this connection.
Mm-hmm.
And so the consequence. So what we're saying is, you strengthen the bond with Allah, and this life will be solved.
Mm-hmm.
This world will be solved.
Mm-hmm.
Where the objective again remains in my head is to solve the world, to
Mm-hmm.
solve the life of people, the quality
Mm-hmm.
of life of people, with
Mm-hmm.
peace, with serenity, with cohesion, with
Mm.
respect, with mutual respect. So
Okay.
why talk of this abstract idea
I'll tell
as
you why. I'll tell
atheist?
you why. I'll tell you why. This framing is wrong. First of all,
Okay,
like if
okay.
you take okay, how do we decide what is going to be successful for humanity? Take the Nobel laureates in literature, in maths, in English, in peace. I mean, it's run by pedophiles. Let's just be very clear on that. The whole system of the Nobel Peace Prize. You all know who Nobel is. If you don't know it, you can look it up. The audacity of setting up some kind of Western privilege system which gives out what will dictate success in a worldly life is farcical if you understand who set it up, who's sitting to decide who gets what. Essentially, success is not in economic progression, even though you think it is, because that's not economic progression. Essentially the last century has seen the biggest shift of resources and wealth from the vast majority of individual people on earth to a very very small group of people, and that process is the exponential surge of that increasing is quite scary actually, in terms of how your access to production in different countries is disappearing, the ability for individuals in those countries to have access to wealth and to have access to their own resources is diminishing. You've got tiny small 12 conglomerations, economic conglomerations, that are starting to suck up all the world's resources, and behind them is a very small group of people. And if you talk about scientific progress and so on and so forth, these are just technical facilities. If you were to tell me that people now are healthier than they were in the past, I would have a very difficult job in understanding or accepting that. Yes, medicine has understood the mechanics of interventions in trauma, for example, of saving life, how the basic system of the body works. But in terms of preventative medicine, it's way behind what it was in the past. So the kind of, if you take, and this is quite a serious attack on modern medicine, and so I'll apologize to people that work in that area. But essentially, if you look at the preventative side of medicine, it's non-existent. The way medicine does work, and I've seen it from my own experience, anecdotally, but also statistically, that the success of medicine is in intervention of trauma, essentially where you have to intervene to diagnose a specific illness and then treat it. And if you look at, okay, a man goes onto the moon, you're able to look into the furthest parts or depths of the Milky Way, for example. And what does it give you in terms of your humanity? So all of these things are absolute. I mean, yes, you can make the case that Muslims should be the forefront of أَفَلَمْ يَسِيرُوا فِي الْأَرْضِ فَتَكُونَ لَهُمْ قُلُوبٌ يَعْقِلُونَ بِهَا. The Quran says it. Should people not travel so that they throughout the earth, so that they have hearts through which they can see? They're supposed to research. They're supposed to study. They're absolutely. I mean, there is a case to
The
say
fact
that Muslims.
the fact we're able to talk and it will be beamed kind of across the world, across the globe.
Okay.
two of us, sitting in two different corners of a city.
Yes.
And so, yeah, I mean,
No, but that's so this is technological. What benefit does, like, it's a question not that we can do it. It is, what is this function able to do for us? Because from one perspective, this whole technology, you could say, is just facilitating mass pedophilia and pornography, and yes, it facilitates other things, but it's like a double-edged sword.
Mhm.
The technology in and of itself does not make you a better person. And it goes without saying that Muslims should be and aware at the forefront until probably the 17th, 18th century of, kind of, research and development and thinking and experimenting and looking for solutions to real problems. That's absolutely the case. Just because it's not happening now, you cannot say that it's due to a lack of belief. If you look at the onslaught of colonialism and imperialism and all these things, I mean, you don't want to go down this route with me, but
Mhm.
we could have done what they did if we were much more bloodthirsty.
Mhm.
The fact that the Ottoman Empire, the Mughal Empire, the Safavid Empire didn't destroy ethnic groups and homogenize them into a mush was their weakness. I'll admit it. It was their weakness. They allowed the Syrian, Aramaic, the Jewish minorities, the Christian minorities, all the religious minorities to exist within the Ottoman Empire. That's yes, let's just say that was a weakness on the part of the Ottomans. They should have killed them all. But we didn't. Why? Because we believe that every single human being is created in the image of God. Okay, if the Americans, when the Spanish went to America and they killed 35 million natives, and that's your progress for you. I mean, I'm just creating a straw man for you now. I'm not saying you're saying this, but your idea of progress, the new world, opening up horizons, 35 million people killed in cold blood. I could rattle off figures, and if you're saying that the Muslims should have done that, I'm saying they couldn't, because they knew that belief in God requires you to understand that everybody is made in the image of God and you cannot kill anybody. Okay. That is a barrier to progress in the way that you're pushing it to me. That the idea of progress you're pushing to me is that you progress regardless of the collateral damage. I'm saying Tawheed stops you doing that. It allows a natural, organic, healthy society to grow. And in opposition to it is, if you heard what we were talking about for 16 sessions, Abraha and this brute force of just demolition. That's the other side of it. You could say, yeah, he wanted to create a unified trade route for the Byzantine Empire, north and south, much more efficient, would tie in Mecca to the world economy, mashallah. No, I'm not accepting it at all. Better a backwater that's safe, sane, secure, organic, and healthy than a powerful economic power that is rotten to the core. And if you're trying to tell me that the American establishment is not rotten to the core, ethically, morally, and there's another thing. There's some research I was reading recently about every major empire. Once it's crumbling, it goes into sexual perversion. When it knows it's about to crumble, it goes into sexual perversion. And now, with the Epstein files, and it's just the tip of the iceberg. I was watching something from the head of Prager Institute in America, who's actually was brought up a Jew, but then became an evangelical Christian. But that old heresy and that dysfunctionality comes out when he was saying it was okay to have, I'm not going to say it, actually, I wouldn't say it this iftar time, but the worst of perversions and defending them, using AI as an excuse to do the worst of perversions. And that's somebody who's supporting research, development, intellectual activity in America with really, amazing people giving each other all these amazing prizes. I don't buy it. Why should I buy it? Because it's rotten to the core. And so why should I take on a line of thinking of a speaker who will say, Israel's produced more Nobel Prize winners than the Muslim community over the last 100 years. Good. I love it. I'd rather that be the case, because what you've done on the back of that is a testimony to your inhumanity. So this whole thing, oh, how many Nobel Prize winners do we have, is a complete red herring. It's just not acceptable because it's anti-intellectual at the basis of it, because you have to look at the criteria through which you establish superiority, you establish progress and development, and for what reason and for what purpose. So if you say, look at the amazing advancements in AI, yeah, come back in 10 years and tell me about them. And when you see the death and destruction of innocent people through mass warfare that doesn't require a human being to actually do anything anymore, then you can say why we were able to write an essay for our university without having to think.
So majority Muwahideen metropolises, Cairo, Lahore, Karachi, Jakarta, you name it, the most chaotic, unclean, full of accidents, no care for the ill, for bad traffic. How do I understand this?
You look at the economic profile of the country. If you look at the economic profile of the country, if you've listened to what I've been saying, the economies of those countries are rich internally and poor structurally because of external intervention. And I don't have to prove that. IMF, World Bank, if you look at the African continent, the amount of money that's taken out through debt repayment is nothing compared to the amount that they're apparently given in aid and help and the structural systems of France, for example, in Western Africa, for example, are structurally created to keep those countries in dire poverty, and the educated elite are placed there to ensure that system never changes. Pakistan's exactly the same. You have the most grotesque manifestation of an oligarchy serving an international order that basically asks, how do we squeeze our population even more and allow you to basically take all of our resources? That's the situation every one of those countries that you mentioned, like Jakarta.
And the solution is connection with God.
The solution was what we talked about in that one episode that we did off topic, which was on the current conflict, which is you have to aid and create coherent alliances with a global South order that brings down that northern oligarchy and that system, which is set up, the whole thing, the UN, the United Nations, IMF, the World Bank, international orders and economic systems are set up, and the debt-based economic system are set up to enslave people, one of which are Muslims. One of which, if you go to South Africa, you got the same thing. You go to South America, you got the same thing. There's nothing unique.
Connection with God is connection with God is in the center of your all.
No, the connection with God is there to make you have sense of it. That's it. It's just the fact that it takes your focus away from the fact that success is not worldly success, and that's it. If your worldly success is built upon moral decadence and rot, that world success is not something that you should seek. That's a basic prophetic teaching that I would never ever put up for discussion. The fact that you do not measure your success by worldly success, by advancement, if that advancement is built in the back of immorality and unethical behavior. You can say, okay, Switzerland, Scandinavia, Norway, these are structural economies that have created their wealth on the back of leveraging contractual agreements with less privileged countries to ensure that they keep that privilege. So if you're in that situation, you're 10 million people living in luxury and talking about organic this and saving the environment that, and heat pumps, you can do that very easily because you've got the privilege of being 10 million, sitting on a national wealth fund, creating instability in other parts of the world, and basically siphoning off the resources. It's very easy, Zubair, to sit there and be smug and say, oh, we're doing this because we're much more elevated and and progressive. I don't buy it at all. You go to the Muslim countries. Look at Indonesia. How many was it? 300 million almost. The Indian diaspora, Muslim diaspora, over 200 million. Pakistan. Any country that stands up against that is up against that whole world order, and so the outward dysfunctionality there will continue until you have that order that's there, which is to do with structural economic issues and military issues. And until those are sorted out, the faith is not something that's going to give you a rise in your GDP. It's going to give you internal solace, and it will give you internally a reason and a way in which to order yourself to stand up to those powers that be. And it is a test. I mean, there's no easy way around that, and there's no simple way, but I don't think the argument that because the West is more progressive, that it's something we should aspire to. If the West itself, in its moral core, is basically dissipating and destroying itself, I don't accept that at all.
So coming back to Surah Quraysh, Jazakallah khair for this. لإيلاف قريش إيلافهم رحلة الشتاء والصيف. And the third one, فليعبدوا رب هذا البيت. Okay, transactional. So we've given you this, and we favored you by this. Because we've done this for you, now you do فليعبدوا رب هذا البيت. Just how do we understand this? How do we
gratitude? Like if I give you something, and you don't show gratitude, that's disrespectful. Like at a human level, if you come to you're traveling and you come to my house, I give you somewhere to stay, I give you food, you stay there for a couple of days. Okay, I'm off. Bye. That's just so ungrateful. So at that simple level, it makes perfect sense. It's not a transactional thing, because I think you're making a mistake in thinking in transactional. It's not. Allah is saying that relative safety that you've got, you should appreciate it by at least looking at the place you're in, which is Meccatul Mukarramah, which is a ma'abad, which is a temple house, sanctuary for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which was originally created by the Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam. Why would you turn your back on that function of the house, the function of the core site as a pilgrimage venue, and not do that when it doesn't take much to show gratitude? So it's not, I think you're looking at a transactional thing. There's no transactional thing here at all. There's a simple thing of gratitude. And if you're given all of this, it just allows you to at least accept the fact that there's human gratitude to the creator of that stability, of that safety that you've been given, as almost like an exceptional case. If you looked at a world, kind of map of different tribes and how they were able to manage different areas and through essentially no kind of work of their own. It's just that geographically they were in a backwater. But then that intervention as well.
They were in a favored place in geography, right? And further, they were coupled with more favor by Abraha getting defeated and now a totally safe route.
Yeah, so the safe routes about economic, routes, the relative safety, out of the way of marauding armies. That it wasn't, it's interesting that they talk about language being preserved. They talk about the language being preserved best where there's no kind of throughfare of armies and cultures and ethnic groups. So any place where you don't have, constant traffic of armies and warriors and trade, which brings new people in and takes the people there out, you essentially have a very good preservation of language, but you have a very good preservation of values and morality and language. So the Quraysh were exactly like that. Sana'a, for example, was a place where it was never conquered by a foreign army in the First or Second World War. Even before that, the Ottomans had a governor there, but it wasn't conquered in the traditional way, which meant that Sana'a and the language of Arabic there was very, very fluent, and it was very, very close to the old pre-Islamic and and Islamic Arabic at the time of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasallam, because there wasn't much flux. And once Quraysh and Mecca, and then it all comes tied into the Islamicate lands, Egyptians, Moroccans, Turkish, they start coming. That makes Arabic language differ. So Quraysh, you would say at that time had a perfect Arabic language. Now, if you go and try and speak to somebody from the Quraysh in Mecca, it's a lot of Urdu, a lot of Hindi, a lot of English. I mean, they've lost their language. The Khalij has lost its language. But at that time, it wasn't the case. It was protected, preserved. It was in relative safety, both naturally and also through these, kind of trade agreement types that they managed to have set out for them. All of that were indications of some kind of divine providence, some kind of divine help, some kind of divine protection for them looking back. So when they did the trade agreements or the agreements that they made, they wouldn't have thought of that as being some sign of that. But when you look back, it's essentially ask them, look back, look at the instance of the Fil, look at the instance of your own trade agreements with different nations and tribes, and look at the relative safety that you have and the ilaf that you have, this contractual, cohesion that you have. This is enough for you to show gratitude. And then obviously from there, it will tie into then the rest of the Quranic message, because this is essentially around the Quraysh and them coming to understand the gratitude that they're due to give to God.
Sheikh, we have 10, 12 minutes left of this program, this session today. A point of clarification here. Now, Quraysh they leveraged their religious position. They were the custodians of the precepts, right?
Mm-hmm.
And their position has been acknowledged by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, even in this, in Quraysh. So they were favored because of their position. And not just the favored, they leveraged for trade. Their position was leveraged by trade.
Mm-hmm.
Is this something normally is frowned upon? Normally it is criticized. Even today, a religious person trying to do a trade, and because he looks overtly religious, or a family that is religious, or mutawallis of certain precincts, their position help them in trade, gives them an unfair advantage.
Mm-hmm.
In this surah, it is allowed. It's okay. Not just okay, it's revered.
Mm-hmm.
It's applauded. So how do we understand this?
You understand it as it is. Is there anything wrong with trading? Is there anything wrong with أحل الله البيع وحرم الربا? The Quran, Surah Al-Baqarah says it clearly that God has made trade halal. Halal meaning good, meaning something that you should not just. It's not just a ruling on its in terms of fiqh. Halal means that it's something you should go towards. وحرم الربا, and has made forbidden for you engagement in usury, extortionate use of leverage in economics. So I don't see why there would be any bar, because the Prophet ﷺ said the strong believer is more honored in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala than the weak believer. And that also indicates towards physical strength, but also towards capacity, which is capacity in terms of economics, helping. And this is why the Prophet also said that, if somebody has been blessed with something, let the blessing of God be shown upon you. In other words, if you're blessed with wealth, that wealth should be shown upon you. Like you should be able to see that this person is somebody that has been blessed. Like Sayyidina Malik radiallahu anhu, he used to trade, but also he went through a period of poverty. He had to sell the wooden beams in his house at a certain point in his life because he was so poor. He became rich, and when he became rich through trade and through teaching, he would wear the most expensive of Yemeni cloaks. According to today's prices, it would be like £50,000 for a cloak. I mean, that's extravagant, but it's not, because it's it's showing the effect of God's blessing upon you. So this whole thing about poverty being an indication of closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is something that is, I think, a scourge in our community because of the fact that they don't understand the purpose of wealth and acquiring it and then using it. And also they don't understand the difference between that and zuhud, which is something that's praiseworthy, which is to do without the world, to do with a little of the world. It doesn't mean to have a little of it. It means to have a little of it in your heart. This is why Sidi Ahmed Zarruq's teacher, Abu Abbas al-Hadrami, he was asked about it by his student, and he said, I can't understand this issue of zuhud because everybody likes to have things that they own and to be wealthy. And he says zuhud is not to have nothing in your hand. It's to have everything in your hand but not allow it to come into your heart. So that is a completely different concept of wealth, different concept of affluence, a different concept of sainthood, a different concept of worldliness and godliness. Because as long as you earn it in a way that's healthy, in a way that is accepted and ethical, then it's perfectly acceptable for you to have it. And that's why this is indicated in Surah Quraysh as a blessing. فَلْيَعْبُدُوا رَبَّ هَذَا الْبَيْتِ is a sense of gratitude for the safety and the prosperity that they've been given. And so everybody, people listening should understand that your exhortation and your exerting yourself to gain wealth and to gain affluence is in and of itself nothing to be frowned upon. It's what relationship that has to you. Does it shift your focus away from God, or does it reinvigorate your belief in the fact that the one that's giving you is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala al-Ghani?
So, leveraging one's religious position knowingly, getting into trade, getting into commerce, is nothing to be ashamed of, nothing to be criticized of, nothing.
No, but you've said the opposite, leveraging your religious position, meaning having a longer beard so you'll get a better contract from another
No,
religious
no, no,
person.
no, 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 no. That's not what I mean.
Leverage is exactly what you're saying.
What I mean is the leveraging. I mean, there are quite in my head. So there are quite strong families that exist entire in the subcontinent, for example. They are strong. They are rooted because of their religious position. They are custodians, and yet they are businessmen. And they get an
So
unfair advantage.
is there business through trade? Is it through fraud? Is it through dishonesty? Is it through short selling or mis-selling things and people accept it because they're religious?
No, the sheer presence gives them an advantage.
Well, that's nothing wrong with that.
Nothing
The
wrong.
presence is, in fiqh al-biyu', in Islamic commercial law, there's sharikat al-wujuh, which is a type of contract which is based upon your face. Face meaning, who are you? I trust you.
Yeah, face value. Yeah. So
And you go to a lot of these places, they'll give you a loan because they know the person or they know your father.
yeah.
But it's not because he's got a big beard. It's because they know they're trustworthy. Sharikat al-wujuh could exist in a person who doesn't have a beard, but they're trustworthy. It's still sharikat al-wujuh. It's still a contract which is based upon your
Conduct.
your conduct, but also your reputation.
Yeah.
So if you're a good religious person, meaning like Al-Amin, like the Prophet ﷺ was that was sharikat al-wujuh. People went into business with the Prophet ﷺ on the very basis of him ﷺ being the Prophet. Not being prophet, before being a prophet, being Al-Amin, being trustworthy, and that was enough for them to do it. And that's the religious, again, that's before he was a Prophet ﷺ. He had that moral center. And it doesn't require you to be religious outright in that way, but generally you'll know. And this, I was watching a clip a couple of days ago, but somebody, he was a Christian. He goes, "I've never been swindled by a Muslim businessman in the trade I do." Maybe, I don't know what he's talking about, but maybe in America, he was talking about America, that if they say something, they'll try and do it. Even if it puts them out, they'll do it. And that's a testament to the fact that, faith can be an amazing pull in those areas.
Could you repeat that fiqh term you said? Shirkat al-Wujuh?
Sharikat al-Wujuh. Sharika is like a
Sharika.
company or a contract, which is wujuh is basically on the basis of your reputation. Wajh literally means face. Yeah.
Subhanallah. Okay, noted. Jazakallah khair. I think we'll end our reflections today on this note.
Inshallah.
Surah Quraysh. We'll continue with the next. There's the first three ayahs, again summarizing them and connecting the first three tomorrow, inshallah. Up until tomorrow, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
नहीं सारे आलम में ऐसा नजारा नहीं, ऐसा मंजर जमाने में देखा नहीं, ऐसा मंजर जमाने में देखा नहीं, जैसा मंजर मदीने में मौजूद है। हमने आँखों से देखा नहीं है मगर, हमने आँखों से देखा नहीं है मगर, उनकी तस्वीर सीने में मौजूद है, जिसने लाकर कलामे इलाही दिया, जिसने लाकर कलामे इलाही दिया, वो मोहम्मद मदीने में मौजूद है। हमने आँखों से देखा नहीं है मगर, हमने आँखों से देखा नहीं है मगर, उनकी तस्वीर सीने में मौजूद है, जिसने लाकर कलामे इलाही दिया, जिसने लाकर कलामे इलाही दिया, वो मोहम्मद मदीने में मौजूद है, में मौजूद है। फूल खिलते हैं बड़ बड़ के सल्ले अला, फूल खिलते हैं बड़ बड़ के सल्ले अला, झूम कर कह रही है इबादे सबा, ऐसी खुशबू चमन के गुलों में कहाँ, ऐसी खुशबू चमन के गुलों में कहाँ, जो नबी के पसीने में मौजूद है। हमने आँखों से देखा नहीं है मगर, हमने आँखों से देखा नहीं है मगर, उनकी तस्वीर सीने में मौजूद है, जिसने लाकर कलामे इलाही दिया, जिसने लाकर कलामे इलाही दिया, वो मोहम्मद मदीने में मौजूद है, में मौजूद है। हमने माना कि जन्नत बहुत है हंसी, हमने माना कि जन्नत बहुत है हंसी, छोड़ कर हम मदीना न जाए कहीं, यूं तो जन्नत में सब है मदीना नहीं, यूं तो जन्नत में सब है मदीना नहीं, और जन्नत मदीने में मौजूद है। हमने आँखों से देखा नहीं है मगर, हमने आँखों से देखा नहीं है मगर, उनकी तस्वीर सीने में मौजूद है, जिस نے لا کر کلام الہی دیا، جس نے لا کر کلام الہی دیا، وہ محمد مدینے میں موجود ہے، موجود ہے۔ چھوڑنا تیرا طیبہ گوارا نہیں، چھوڑنا تیرا طیبہ گوارا نہیں، سارے عالم میں ایسا نظارہ نہیں، ایسا منظر زمانے میں دیکھا نہیں، ایسا منظر زمانے میں دیکھا نہیں، جیسا منظر مدینے میں موجود ہے۔ ہم نے آنکھوں سے دیکھا نہیں ہے مگر، ہم نے آنکھوں سے دیکھا نہیں ہے مگر، ان کی تصویر سینے میں موجود ہے، جس نے لا کر کلام الہی دیا، جس نے لا کر کلام